Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 6 important articles for today's analysis. There are 4 articles that require a comprehensive analysis as they are relevant for both prelims and mains. And we have a couple of articles relevant for prelims as well. So let's cover all these topics in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from the initiative, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And also please note that after the session ends, every day we provide you practice questions on our official Telegram channel. These questions are based on the articles that have been discussed in the session. So do join the Telegram channel by scanning the QR code, or the link can be found in the video description so that you can attempt the Hindu news analysis quiz every day and revise these articles and prepare for the upcoming prelims. So with this, let's get started by looking at the first article from the front page of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Today we have a couple of important articles in the newspaper related to the issue of using bulldozers to demolish the houses of those who are accused in riots and certain crimes. You might have heard that several state governments, particularly Uttar Pradesh, even in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, etc., the state and municipal administration have often undertaken an exercise where they use bulldozers to demolish the houses of those who are accused of being involved in riots and certain criminal activities. Now, this issue has raised the question of fairness, whether due process is being followed, and the issue has reached the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. So today we have 2 important articles on the front page itself. We have this article related to a verdict that was delivered by the Supreme Court yesterday on this sensitive matter. And we also have a detailed column which talks about the entire issue in detail. So let's take a look at both the articles and carry out a detailed analysis of this particular issue. So as I mentioned, several state governments have made it a practice to deliver this so-called bulldozer justice. Whenever there are riots, usually communal riots, or whenever certain crimes have been committed and the accused have been arrested by the police, we have often seen that the state government, along with the state police and the local municipal authorities, they bring these bulldozers without any notice, without following the due process, and they demolish the houses of the accused. Now, this is seen as a form of quick justice. This is often appreciated as well, especially on social media. A lot of people back the government, they support these actions, saying such strict punishment has to be delivered against the accused who are involved in rioting and criminal activities. But there are critics of this policy as well, and the Supreme Court itself has right now ordered the states to put a stop to this practice, as the Supreme Court is framing pan-India guidelines with regard to demolition of property of the accused. Be it any kind of crime, the question of demolition of property using bulldozers without following the due process raises key legal and constitutional questions. And even in general, demolition of property when there are violations, let's say the building is violating the building codes, the bylaws of the municipal body, even then local authorities, they do have a right to issue the notice and demolish the property. So to deal with demolition of property in general, the Supreme Court is looking to frame all India guidelines which has to be followed by the authorities. And until these guidelines are framed by the court has ordered the governments to stop this practice, to put a moratorium on the practice as of now. So this verdict was delivered in a recent case related to Gujarat, where a petitioner had approached the court asking for a stay against the demolition of his property one of the family members was accused of being involved in a criminal activity, and the local authorities had sent bulldozers to demolish the house of the accused. So the petitioner approached the court asking for immediate relief, as the entire family would be affected if the house is demolished. So the Supreme Court has intervened, asking the authorities to not demolish this house and put a stop to this practice as of now. And the Supreme Court has begun consultation with all the stakeholders to frame pan-India guidelines regarding the so-called bulldozer justice. Now let's dive a little deep into this topic, examine the legal constitutional angle behind this particular issue. Let's look at both sides of the argument without any bias or without any favor. Now, state governments which have often resorted to this practice, be it Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, etc., they often justify this policy by stating that it delivers quick justice. It acts as a deterrent against crime. And as I mentioned, this policy has even been appreciated, supported and praised by large sections of people in the society. But let's see what the law says, what the Constitution says, what the Supreme Court has observed about this practice. Now please understand, if you look at the principles of natural justice in any constitutional democracy where you have an independent judiciary, where the law is supreme, where it is the rule of the law, in such a democratic setup, the law of the land has to be followed. The law of the land is seen as supreme, rule of law is seen as supreme. So if you look at the Indian Constitution and the criminal justice system in India, it provides for due process to be followed, or what we call as due process of law. It essentially means that the courts will examine whether the accused is guilty or not. The state, the prosecution, has a responsibility to establish the guilt, to produce the burden of proof through investigation. Then the courts will determine whether the accused is guilty according to the law of the land, and a fair punishment, a proportionate punishment according to the crime will be delivered. So according to principles of natural justice, the accused is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Anyone accused of a crime is presumed by the court, by the judiciary, to be innocent until the guilt is proven by the prosecution. So the burden of proving the guilt of the accused lies on the investigating authorities, the police, the prosecution which presents the case in the court. So they have to establish the guilt, and the court will determine whether the accused is guilty or not. And until that happens, the court presumes the accused to be innocent. So if the state is taking this matter into its own hands and demolishing houses, isn't that a derailment of the principles of natural justice? Isn't that a breach of due process of law? Isn't the state already presuming the guilt of the accused? It is for the courts to determine whether the accused is guilty or not, and then deliver a proportionate punishment as provided under the law. That is why the Supreme Court has observed that this practice of delivering the so-called bulldozer justice is like running a bulldozer on the law of the land itself. It's like destroying the laws of the country, the constitutional rights, by using a bulldozer. It has compared this practice with the very destruction of the supremacy of the law of the land. The Supreme Court has come down quite heavily on state governments and municipal bodies and the authorities and officials involved in such demolition drives. So that's why the Supreme Court has ordered that this petitioner's house should not be demolished as of now. And the Supreme Court has invited consultation with all the stakeholders to frame pan-India guidelines regarding this issue. It's not just about the houses of accused being demolished. It's also about building violations where property which has been constructed might be in violation of local building laws. But however, even the demolition of that property should follow the due process. There should be checks and balances in the system to prevent any misuse and abuse of authority. This practice cannot be selective, cannot be arbitrary, and that is what the Supreme Court has observed. the Supreme Court has pointed out that the practice of demolishing the houses, that too particularly of the accused in criminal activities and riots, it violates the right to housing. It in a way goes against several fundamental rights guaranteed under the Constitution. So the Supreme Court wants to take a detailed look at this issue. Now also please understand, now let's say there is an individual who has been involved in rioting, or let's say there is an individual who has committed a crime. Now you tell me, how fair is it to demolish the house where the entire family is also living with the criminal? The family members will also have to pay the price. So in that family there might be young children or old age people, senior citizens or disabled people. So the whole family will be punished even before the guilt was established in the court, even before due process was followed. So this is a classic case of selective, arbitrary state action which goes against the law of the land, against the spirit of the Constitution, against rule of law and against due process of law. Now if you look at this detailed column that we have in today's newspaper, the writers, they highlight the importance of due process of law. So let's quickly understand this concept and then apply this to the issue that we are discussing. Due process of law essentially means that the courts which are interpreting the law, which are the guardians of the Constitution, they try to ensure that there is rationality and fairness in the application of the law. When any law is being implemented, enforced, it should equally apply for everyone. There should be fairness, there should be some logic, there should be some rationality. And any bias, any form of inequality which is seen in the application of law will be immediately struck down by the courts as invalid. And if the law itself is going against the spirit of the Constitution, against the values of our fundamental rights, such laws can even be declared null and void. Or let's say if the state is overreaching its jurisdiction and misusing the law of the land, even then the courts can step in, declare those actions as null and void. So guaranteeing this fair treatment with equality, ensuring that there is no bias in the law, in the application of the law, and everyone is treated equally with fairness, that is the essential philosophy behind the concept of due process of law. The steps which are outlined under the law of the land which is enacted by the legislature, should be followed and implemented not just in theory but in spirit. This is what the courts will check whenever there is state action involved, whether the authorities followed the actual process which is set out under the law of the land. Are these actions in line with the spirit of the Constitution, the values of our Constitution? Does the action of the state violate any fundamental rights or any legal rights? The action of the state, is it rational? Is it fair? Is it equitable? So this is checked by the court, and essentially the application of due process of law helps in upholding the spirit and values of the Constitution and the fundamental rights guaranteed under the Constitution. So anything that goes against this can be struck down as invalid, null and void by the courts. Now, as I told you, this policy of delivering bulldozer justice on the accused, it is seen as a retributive approach, an approach where the focus is on delivering quick punishment which borders on revenge, and it is seen as an approach which is tough on crime. Governments brag that they are extremely tough on crime and criminals by resorting to such action, which is an eye for an eye approach. That one person was involved in riots, one person committed a crime, now the state will get back and punish the criminal and the entire family by demolishing the house. And it's also about how this demolition is done. There is no judicial order which backs up the demolition drive. The guilt of the accused is not even established yet, right? So we are just believing the authorities who have called this person as the accused. And also please understand that the existing processes as per the municipal bylaws, right, they state that a notice has to be given before a demolition. And the person who suffers from the demolition and eviction drive should have a option to appeal against the decision to demolish the house. There should be an appeal process. There should be a grievance redressal mechanism. And how is it fair for the whole family to pay the price, even presuming that the accused is guilty? How is it fair for the whole family to pay the price? Because this results in a severe derailment of justice. This becomes a punitive drive, a retributive form of justice at a time when the guilt of the accused is not even proven in the court of law. So this is the reason why the court has stepped in. This goes against even international guidelines when it comes to eviction and displacement of people. In fact, United Nations has brought out a set of basic principles and guidelines on development-based evictions and displacement in 2019. If the state is exercising its authority to evict people from their property or demolish private property that could lead to displacement, there are certain basic principles and guidelines which have to be kept in mind. In fact, if you look at the law of the land in India as well, there is a due process which is clearly defined before a house or a property is demolished by the authorities. The UN principles prioritize a humanitarian perspective. Now let's say a property is in violation of local laws, building codes. Definitely such a building has to be demolished, there's no doubt about it, but authorities have to follow the established process. The due process has to be followed. They can't come overnight without any notice and bring bulldozers and demolish the house. Now this is what has happened in many cases. When those who are accused of being involved in riots and crimes, their houses have been demolished at a very short notice. There is no legal notice issued. The authorities, they just appear usually in the middle of the night in front of the house and bring these heavy machinery including bulldozers and JCBs, and they demolish the property, and they quite literally, they physically throw out the family members from the house without giving them any time to even plan their rehabilitation. Because overnight if the house is destroyed, where will the family members go? Right? Where will senior citizens, children and others who are vulnerable in the family, where will they go overnight? What about their right to appeal? What about the due process? What about their right to get justice if the authorities are wrong? Because once this action is done, it is almost irreversible. Once your house is destroyed, it is irreversible. For several months and years, the whole family will continue to pay the price. So tomorrow, what if the accused is not held guilty? What if it is determined that the case was false to begin with? Or what if there isn't enough evidence to prove the guilt of the accused? The whole family would have already served the punishment. And this marks a major derailment of justice. It's a violation of the rule of law, the law of the land. So that is the reason why the UN principles prioritize humanitarian perspective. And the Supreme Court also has stated that it is very essential to formulate a pan-India guideline with regard to demolition of property. So be it in cases of those accused of crime, or be it in general cases where there are building code violations, local law violations, in any case of property demolition, eviction and displacement, there is a need for an all India guideline which now the Supreme Court has taken up. It is consulting all the stakeholders and it might very soon come out with a set of all India guidelines. In the column, the writers are arguing that if you look at the current law in the country and if you look at the due process which is established in this regard, the law provides for demolition of property only as an exceptional circumstance. Only when that is the last option available, the last resort available, only then a complete demolition of the property has to be carried out. There is no specific legal provision that provides the authorities the right to demolish houses of the accused. This is seen as extra legal. This is seen as extra legal action. There is no legal backing that empowers the state authorities and the municipal bodies to demolish the property of the accused. That is why critics are pointing out that this action is purely extra legal action. But when it comes to property which has violated building codes, let's say local building bylaws, the municipal laws have been violated. even then there is a clear process. There is a process which provides for a balance between state action and the right of the citizens to have a right to housing and the right to resettlement, the right against forced displacement and eviction. So, as per the writers of the column, the authorities have to ensure that due process is followed in all three stages of the demolition. Whenever a property is being demolished by the authorities, there are three stages. First is the pre-demolition stage, before the demolition is carried out. Before the demolition is carried out, it is the responsibility of the authority to prove that the building is in violation of the building codes and the local bylaws. It is the responsibility of the authority to prove that the criminal who has been accused, right, is guilty by establishing the proof with evidence in a court of law. Without that, a person and his or her family cannot be made to pay the price through evictions and forced demolitions and displacement. And more importantly, if a demolition has to be carried out, a legal notice has to be issued with adequate time being given for the concerned person to respond. But in the case of these bulldozer demolitions which have happened in UP, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, there has been no notice. As I told you, authorities have landed at the doorstep in the middle of the night and brought the heavy machinery and demolished the houses and literally thrown out the families from the houses. So there has been no notice issued, which means the due process has not been followed. And it's also about ensuring that the demolition drive is fair and reasonable. For that, there should be an independent committee, according to the writers of the column. There should be an independent committee which evaluates the possibility of demolishing a property for violating the municipal laws and building codes. This committee should consist not only government officials, but there should be civil society and judicial members on this committee who can take up these cases and review the fairness of the case and then accordingly carry out proportionate action. Maybe instead of demolishing the entire house, only the part of the house which is violating the building bylaw can be demolished. And also, care can be taken to protect the vulnerable within the family, the elderly people, the children, the disabled people, right? They can't be forcefully evicted overnight. Adequate care has to be taken. And also, heavy machinery need not be used. The state is not here to display its force and authority. The state is here to protect your rights. Even if there are violations of the building bylaws, the property can be demolished as per the law, as per the due process, without using heavy machinery and equipment. The whole circumstance has to be taken into account. The surrounding environment has to be taken into account. Because the drive to demolish one house might lead to damage to the neighboring houses as well when heavy machinery is used. So all these precautions have to be exercised in the pre-demolition stage. That is when due process is seen to be followed. Then during demolition, adequate care has to be taken to ensure that the authorities don't go overboard and misuse their authority and power. And after demolition, in the final phase, post-demolition, there should be an option for the family which has suffered or the family which has been displaced to appeal, to approach a grievance authority to get that redressed. And if the authorities were in the wrong, there should be an option to restore justice so that the family can be compensated and rehabilitated and resettled. Because right to housing is indeed an important right. So this is about the lack of due process, and in many cases, especially at the municipal level, it has been noticed that the authorities blatantly violate the existing due process. I am not just talking about the cases involving the demolition of the houses of the accused in riots and crimes. I am talking in general about demolition of property which are violating municipal laws. Local authorities have often exercised the power to demolish property blatantly without following the due process, without paying attention to these precautionary measures. So that is why the writers of the column strongly feel that the court should step in. The court has already stepped in, they appreciate that, and the court should bring out all India guidelines by consulting all the stakeholders to ensure that right to housing is protected and there are checks and balances in the system to prevent the abuse of authority. The due process of law has to be followed. The supremacy of law should be upheld. The state can't cut short the due process. Before courts can rule that the accused is guilty and deliver proportionate punishment as per the law, as per the criminal justice system, states cannot take matters into their own hands and use municipal laws to demolish the property of the accused. So this action is blatantly discriminatory, it is arbitrary, it is selective, and it leads to derailment of justice. It violates fundamental rights as well. So this is what you need to know from this important topic which is covered in today's newspaper. Now let's look at a question. What kind of question can come in GS paper 2? The thread in extra legal demolitions carried out across different parts of India is a lack of due process and a blatant disregard for directives issued by the judiciary in the past. Examine. So how can you approach answer writing for such a question? Maybe in the introduction, you can start out by highlighting the importance of rule of law, the supremacy of law of the land, and the importance of following due process, so that you are setting the right context. In general, you can talk about the supremacy of the law, the rule of law and due process, and how the judiciary will eventually decide whether an accused is guilty or not and what should be the punishment, the quantum of punishment, right? Because the judiciary which follows due process will ensure that fairness and rationality is followed. And even if, let's say, the judiciary is found to be lacking, the accused, right, or the convict, right, if they are convicted, they still have the option of appealing to a higher court. So present this argument right at the beginning, and then in the body discuss this context of so-called bulldozer justice. You can mention that in certain states, those who are accused in rioting and those who are accused of being involved in certain crimes, their houses have been demolished by the authorities. The state and municipal authorities, they often come overnight without any legal notice, without following due process, and even before the guilt of the accused is proven in a court of law, the authorities demolish the property, which has raised serious legal and constitutional questions. Then present the argument about how the whole family gets punished, how the accused is being presumed to be guilty, which is against the principle of natural justice. The law presumes the accused to be innocent, but the authorities are presuming the accused to be guilty, right? So present this key argument, discuss how this is a violation of due process, and finally conclude with the observation of the Supreme Court. You can say that Supreme Court has recently stayed such demolition drives. It has called such forms of bulldozer justice as an act of running a bulldozer on the law of the land. And it has set up a process. It is consulting with all stakeholders to frame pan-India guidelines, which is necessary to deal with demolition. You can mention the UN principles as well, which offers a humanitarian approach to demolition to protect the right against eviction and displacement, and how there should be more care and concern when such demolitions are carried out, right? So discuss that and you can conclude your answer. Now let's look at the next article, which is a very interesting article on page number 10. The writer of the column is focused on how healthcare is proposed to undergo a transformation, a revolution, with the adoption of AI, especially in primary healthcare. Of late, there has been a lot of buzz, not just in the field of artificial intelligence, but its applications. I'm sure all of you are familiar with generative AI, large language models, and the kind of disruption they're already causing in the tech industry. So as AI evolves at a rapid pace, one potential application and advantage of AI is to revolutionize and transform the healthcare sector. So of late, there has been a lot of buzz regarding employment of AI technologies to transform the delivery of primary healthcare. In healthcare, generally we have 3 levels: primary, secondary, tertiary. So your first point of contact right? When you suffer from, let's say, a few symptoms, or when you have a health condition, the first doctor you consult, right, where you get your immediate diagnosis done, your basic treatment done, that is the primary healthcare level. As the complications increase, where you need more sophisticated infrastructure, diagnosis tools and treatments, you proceed to secondary and tertiary healthcare. So primary healthcare is the very face of the healthcare system, your first point of contact with the healthcare system. So if AI can transform healthcare industry at the primary level, that could have great advantages. But the writer is raising a few concerns. If AI is employed on a massive scale at the primary level, the writer says there are certain concerns which come up, especially in a country like India. He says that India is not fully prepared as of now to roll out AI in healthcare, especially at primary healthcare, because we don't have the foundational system which is necessary to roll out AI technologies and its applications. So let's take a look at this analysis which the writer is providing. And also I would like to point out at the very beginning that I personally feel this article is a little biased, right? So I would like to balance it out with a counter argument as well. Is that clear? The writer strongly feels that using AI in healthcare at primary level without addressing the foundational issues can erode the quality of healthcare in the country. Definitely the writer is raising some valid concerns which we are going to discuss. The writer is absolutely right when he says that India is not fully prepared for the rollout of AI tools, not just in healthcare but in general. We don't have sufficient regulation, governance and legal framework to deal with the potential implications and consequences of AI technology. So I completely agree with the writer here that India is not prepared legally. We don't have the governance framework, we don't have regulations in place. So if something goes wrong, there is no accountability, right? So anyone will definitely agree with the writer on this particular point. But the general tone of the column is a little problematic because the writer talks primarily about AI replacing your physician at the primary healthcare level. The writer says that AI tools are great when it comes to replacing manual tasks and repetitive tasks. See, any AI tool, it's built on machine learning algorithms, right? They basically learn from data which is fed to them. These AI programs, machine learning programs, they learn the patterns based on the historical data which is fed to them. They learn to identify those patterns and then they can easily mimic human-like action. So when it comes to very manual tasks, repetitive tasks, this can be easily automated and replaced by AI, and this is good for the industry because it can bring efficiency. Because we humans, we have fatigue, we get tired, we can make errors, we can make mistakes when we are carrying out manual, routine, repetitive tasks. So this is an area where AI can be a replacement, or at least it can be a supplement, right? But if you look at the doctor-patient relationship, if you look at primary healthcare system and the overall delivery of healthcare, where a patient interacts with the doctor, explains all the problems, the doctor listens to you, understands your context, right? And then provides you the right treatment, the right diagnosis. And also there is an angle of human consciousness, which is very critical, right? The doctor has to be perceptive of your problems, your concerns. The doctor can't be dismissive of your background, your family health history, etc. And more importantly, the doctor should show empathy. The medical domain is primarily built on the foundation of empathy, right? The human-centric approach is critical. So this is where I agree with the writer again that AI tools cannot replace the physician at the primary level. That is unlikely and it is not desirable as well. At any point, you need empathy to be the driving factor in the healthcare industry. Patients need that love and care and attention from the healthcare system, right? The human-centric approach, which is a result of consciousness, cultural, social factors, this is very, very critical. So AI can never replace that, and it's not desirable to even seek a replacement of the human-centric approach with AI tools. But writer makes one mistake according to me, or at least shows a bias, by presuming that AI is essentially being positioned as a replacement to physicians, that AI might take away the human-centric approach in healthcare entirely, right? So the writer says, yes, there are moral ethical concerns. Again, we can agree with that. When you are rolling out AI technology or any technology when it is being used, there will be moral ethical concerns arising out of it, right? But the task of delivering basic healthcare, right, carrying out the diagnosis, listening to the patient, providing the treatment, this is never going to be replaced by AI. The writer in a way doesn't get that point, right? So this is where I feel the writer shows a slight bias and argues that AI is almost likely to take over the role of the physician in primary healthcare, but that is not the case. So just as a counter argument, let us see where AI is being deployed in healthcare. See, it's not a future. This is already happening. This is the present already. AI is already playing a role in your healthcare system, right? Most experts believe that AI can transform, revolutionize the healthcare industry. So let me tell you where exactly AI is being deployed, where it can have a transformative impact. Now, for example, if you've seen, when you go to a doctor, right, you go to a clinic, you go to a hospital, you see that the doctor is doing a lot of repetitive tasks, right? Not just the doctor, but the whole clinic, the whole hospital environment. There are a lot of workers involved doing a lot of repetitive manual tasks, like registering the patient, filling out the forms. The doctor is writing your prescription, right? So this is a waste of time. This is usually repetitive. It's a routine task. Let's say you go to a clinic to get a procedure done. You want to claim insurance for that. You have to fill out certain forms, provide certain documents, share your health related data. Let's say you got certain diagnostic tests done. You're right, you have to present the data as well. And the doctor has to go through your data, analyze your data, look at the diagnosis. These are quite repetitive tasks, and AI has a great ability to bring more efficiency here and save time. Today you have sophisticated AI tools which can look at patterns and data from your diagnosis, from your family health history, your personal health history, and even predict possible health outcomes in the future. For example, in breast cancer screening, AI tools have become very effective. They can provide you a future prediction of even up to 5 years, that 5 years down the line, this patient is likely to get breast cancer. Not with 100% certainty, but at least the likelihood of it. So AI tools can indeed learn from data. But I do agree that the writer has a point. The writer says the efficiency of an AI tool depends on the data which it is fed with. But in a country like India, where health data is not adequately collected, where there isn't adequate data protection laws in the country, there's no AI regulation and governance, this could lead to complete misuse, and it could even raise a lot of serious ethical moral questions, right? But one thing is very certain, AI is not going to replace your doctors. That is unlikely to happen in the near future. Your physician will be there, but AI will transform healthcare by supplementing the healthcare ecosystem, by assisting the doctors, the workers in the healthcare industry, right? It will reduce their burnout rate, because studies have shown in US, in UK, in India as well, that at the primary level, there is a severe burden on the doctors, the nurses, and everyone involved in the healthcare system. Because of the constant interaction they have with patients and the high burden, the workload, it becomes very repetitive. They face incredible stress and very high burnout. The burnout rate is very high, which might lead physicians to make mistakes, which might lead the hospital workers to make mistakes, right? You might have had this experience where doctor would have prescribed a certain set of tablets, but the nurse might get you a very different set of tablets, a basic human error. So this can definitely be avoided. Better diagnosis can be provided. The whole registration and filling out forms, right? This whole process can be automated. Even sharing your health data, your health history, then looking at diagnosis, right? Providing future prediction. This is where AI can play a critical role. So it's not going to replace doctor. The human-centric approach will be there. The empathy factor will remain. But AI can transform the healthcare sector by making your doctors more efficient, by reducing the burden on them, by reducing the administrative repetitive tasks. So this is where I feel AI can be transformative, especially where there is a gap in the healthcare system. In India, in our public healthcare system especially, there is a critical gap. So these gaps can be better plugged with AI, and they do have a transformative impact. But however, the writer, as I said, is raising few valid points. Especially in India, we don't even have a proper law or a regulation or a guideline with regard to AI technologies. Now, if you look at European Union, the EU is miles ahead of India. It has already enacted the AI Act, which we have studied in one of the previous sessions. Recently, we managed to enact a data protection law. A digital data protection law has been enacted, but experts feel that the current data protection framework is not adequate. So, in healthcare, AI tools will depend on patients' data to learn. So, what if data privacy is compromised? What is the legality of data collection when it comes to your personal health? This is private data, this is intimate data belonging to the individual. And right to privacy, as you know, is a fundamental right under Article 21 as declared by the Supreme Court in the KS Puttaswamy judgment. So, when you don't have adequate safeguards, how will you regulate the collection of health data, the analysis of health data based on which the AI programs will be trained? What if there are violations? What if there are ethical, moral concerns which come up? How will the state resolve them? In the EU, for example, the AI Act bans any AI technology which is deemed to be harmful. The AI Act in European Union only allows those AI tools which are not harmful to the society at large. But in India, we don't have any such regulation as of now. That is why the writer is saying it is still premature to think of rolling out AI in primary healthcare. So here we can definitely agree with the writer. He has a very relevant point that we haven't got the foundations right in India. There are fundamental issues in our regulation, in our legal landscape, which doesn't facilitate the rollout of AI in any sector, not even healthcare, in any industry. But the fear that the writer is raising about AI replacing doctors is an unfounded fear. AI, as I said, is not going to replace your doctors. The human-centric approach will remain. The empathy factor will remain because AI will primarily supplement the healthcare workers. It will make them more efficient, reduce their burden. It will take over the routine, administrative, repetitive tasks. It will provide for better diagnosis, more efficiency and error-free environment. But it's not going to replace your doctors. It will be assisting your doctors, assisting the healthcare workers. So that is what we learn from this important article. Now, please take up a practice question based on this. India cannot jump into AI-driven healthcare without first addressing the foundational issues within its health system. Critically evaluate. See, I have already discussed this topic in the right flow and with the right structure. Right? So, I am not going to give the model answer for this. Based on how we discussed the first question, I expect you to take the points from this article. Right? Use the same flow and structure and try to build an answer to this question. Let's see how many of you can write this answer and post the answer in the comment section. Now, let's look at another important article, again related to the judiciary. On page 1 and 14, we have two articles related to polity and even ethics. During this year's Ganesha festival, during Ganesh Chaturthi, there was something remarkable which happened, something which caught the nation's attention. Prime Minister Modi was visiting the house of Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud. On the occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi, he went to the private residence of the Chief Justice of India, performed the puja as well, and this video, the images went viral on social media. A lot of them were praising and appreciating the cordial ties between the Chief Justice and the Prime Minister. They were appreciating their faith and belief as well. But this has triggered a massive uproar and controversy as well. Number of experts and critics have come out and they have condemned this particular act of both the Chief Justice and as well as the Prime Minister. Let's understand why. What is this controversy all about? Is it wrong for a Prime Minister to visit the house of a Chief Justice of India and take part in a private or religious event? That is the question which we have to examine. See, if you look at the Indian Constitution, the Constitution provides for clear separation of powers between the judiciary and the executive. Now, can you find out the article in the Constitution which provides for the separation of powers? Please mention that in the comments below. The Constitution is very clear that in a democracy, there has to be a clear distinction drawn out between, let's say, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. Having an independent judiciary is extremely critical in a functional democracy, because eventually it is the judiciary which will hold the executive accountable for its violations, right? So this is a well accepted principle, a constitutional norm as well, that there has to be separation of powers between the three branches of the state, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Now see, D.Y. Chandrachud has built a great reputation about his integrity, his professionalism. I don't think I even have to justify that. D.Y. Chandrachud has handled some of the toughest cases in our country, delivered some landmark judgments, even going against the government in several cases and instances. So this incident which has happened, it's not casting a shadow on the personal integrity of the Chief Justice, but it is casting aspersions about the relationship between the executive and the judiciary. So opposition parties, several legal experts, constitutional experts, many of them have criticized this particular interaction between the PM and Chief Justice at a personal capacity. See, they are not doing this at an official level. This was a personal event. They might be good friends, they might have a cordial relationship. Chief Justice might have invited the PM. Many of you might say, what's wrong with that? Right? They're following their faith, their belief, they're celebrating a festival, let them do it. Why are you criticizing it? I understand that argument. The ruling party also has defended the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice, stating that the opposition is unnecessarily creating a controversy around it. But let us look at the guidelines, the legal framework in the country and the constitutional framework in the country. Let us see why the critics have a valid point. See, in a democracy, it's very important to ensure that justice is seen to be done. It's not just enough for the courts to do justice, but the public should feel that yes, justice will be done, that I have confidence in the judiciary that my rights will be protected. That belief, that faith that the public holds on the judiciary is very crucial, very critical. And that is what in a way guarantees the independence of the judiciary. The judiciary might be truly independent. The executive may not be interfering, and the judiciary might be completely independent, professional, and all the judges might have the highest integrity, right? But still, the public should feel that yes, I have faith in the judiciary. The judiciary is not working for the executive. That perception is very crucial in case of a democracy where an independent judiciary plays a critical role. In fact, we have a set of guidelines in this regard that defines the conduct of judges, not just in their public life, but even in their private life. See, when you hold a high office, right, that to constitutional offices, not just the judges, even as a government official, senior government leaders, or even as part of the legislature, right, when you're holding high constitutional offices, it is important to be mindful of your actions in your personal life as well. Because what you do in your personal space reflects on your integrity, on your probity in your public life. That's why I said, when it comes to having independent judiciary, right, it's not just enough that justice is done by the courts, that courts protect your fundamental rights and hold the executive accountable and create checks and balances. It is also very important for the public to feel, to perceive the judiciary to be independent. It's important to see that justice is being done, right? So in that regard, the conduct of judges is very important. The Supreme Court itself in 1997 had brought out a 16-point document called the Restatement of Values of Judicial Life. Is that clear? Back in 1997, the Supreme Court had brought out a set of conduct of rules for judges that applies for their public life in their capacity as judges and as well as to their private life. Because what they do in their private space will have an impact on their image in public life. So it's a 16-point document. Let's quickly take a look at what the document says. The document starts by pointing out that what is expected of the Supreme Court and High Court judges. It clearly mentions that it's not just enough to do justice, it should be seen that justice is being done. The public should feel that, the public should believe that the judiciary is independent. So this means that the behavior and conduct of judges is very crucial, that too in the higher judiciary, and they must conform to the highest principles of impartiality, and they should be seen in the eyes of the public to be independent judges. They should be seen by the public to be not under the influence of the executive or the legislature. That is very, very critical. So now if a senior judge or if the Chief Justice himself is sharing a personal moment with a top government leader, now this might lead to spread of unnecessary rumors. See, as I said, Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud need not prove his integrity. He is a man of highest integrity and everyone agrees with that. It's not just a personal opinion. Everyone, even the opposition agrees with that, right? The Prime Minister again had no intention. There was probably no such malintention on the part of the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice. But the very fact that two senior functionaries got together in a personal space, in a personal event, might spread the wrong message. It might create a illusion, a perception that, look, the government and the judiciary are together. They are not separate. Now, this is where I am reminded of a very important statement made by a former Chief Justice of India, M. N. Venkatachalaya. He had told then Prime Minister Narasimha Rao that judiciary need not be cordial with the government. You need not be friends. Judges need not be friends with government ministers. There need not be any cordial relationship between the judiciary and the government. It has to be a correct relationship. Ethically, it has to be a correct relationship with focus on probity. High constitutional functionaries, they should be mindful of the value of probity in public life. Personally, they might have complete integrity and professionalism. They may not be corrupt, they may not be under the influence of anyone. They might be delivering their work without fear, without favor, without any bias. But ensuring probity in public life depends on your conduct in your personal life as well. Just the act of a judge being seen with a government minister in a personal event is enough to cast aspersions and shadows and to bring rumors that judiciary and government are hand in hand. Now imagine tomorrow a senior judge maybe attends a party at the house of a minister and the images go viral. They may not be having any malintention. They might be genuinely friends. They have every right to get together. But the fact that those images went out and public saw that might lead some people to believe that, look, the judges are partying with the ministers. So they are obviously working together. Now what will the person think? They will think, I'll never get justice. Even if government violates the constitutional rights and I go to the judiciary, I'll never get my justice because judges and ministers are together. They are partying together, they are working together. That is the perception that gets created. So it's very important to prevent that. That is why former Chief Justice M. N. Venkatachalaya said, he told Prime Minister Narasimha Rao that we need not be cordial to each other. We are not friends. We have to be correct. We have to be ethically correct. We have to follow the conduct rules. There has to be a clear separation between the executive and the judiciary. This has to be maintained in one's personal life as well. Is that clear? So that is where the criticism which has come up, the controversy which has erupted is in a way valid, because the Supreme Court guidelines itself clearly state that any act of a judge of Supreme Court or High Court, whether in official capacity or personal capacity, which erodes the credibility of this perception, has to be avoided. And you would expect the Chief Justice to know that. This is the first point under the Restatement of Values of Judicial Life, which is a 16-point document that provides the code of conduct for the higher judiciary. It basically puts a restriction on the judges. It urges the judges to avoid any conduct in public capacity or personal capacity which might erode the credibility of the office that they are holding. So this is where probably the Chief Justice and the Prime Minister, they erred, and this raises unnecessary aspersions and doubts about the independence of the judiciary. As I said, there was no malintention. Both the functionaries have established their integrity, their reputation, their professionalism. They need not prove that. But the very act of both of them being seen together at a personal event could raise aspersions and erode the faith in the judiciary, raise questions on the independence of the judiciary. Tomorrow, let's say, Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud passes a Supreme Court verdict in a major constitutional case, and let's say the verdict goes in favor of the government. Even if the Chief Justice has taken the right call as per the law, as per the constitution, with complete integrity and professionalism, tomorrow people might start saying that, look, that day Chief Justice and Prime Minister were together, and today the Chief Justice has passed a very important ruling favoring the government. That is the aspersion cast. That is the rumor which might spread that could erode the faith of the public in the judiciary. That could raise questions about the independence of the judiciary. So it's not about justice just being done. It's about justice being seen to be done. Is that clear? So this is a very important value. The value of probity in public life is very crucial, even for civil servants. If you look at the code of conduct for civil servants, probity is a very, very important value. What you do in your personal life will have an impact on your public image. It could affect your office, the office that you are holding. So you have to be very mindful of what you do in your personal space. You have every right to exercise your basic rights, but you have to be mindful, conscious of what you are doing. Whether willingly through an act or through an act of omission, if it is getting conveyed that your personal conduct is affecting your public image, then you should desist from doing that. So this is a great lesson for future civil servants as well. So do let me know what you think. Let me know what is your view on this controversy. Was it correct on the part of the Prime Minister to go to the house of the Chief Justice of India to participate in the Ganesh Chaturthi celebration? Was it just an innocent event, or is the controversy justified? Is it justified that it raises aspersions? They may not have any such intention. Prime Minister has no such intention. Chief Justice may not have such intention. Both are people of high integrity, right? But will it affect the image of the judiciary? Did it send out the wrong message? Was it a violation of conduct of rules of judges? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Coming to another important article on page 16. The article is related to international relations and a very important visit of India's National Security Advisor to Russia. India's NSA Ajit Doval visited Russia, went to Moscow to participate in the BRICS NSA meeting. BRICS is a grouping of emerging economies founded by Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Recently, new members have been added, such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, right? These are the new members who have joined. Argentina was also added, but Argentina has rejected the membership. So these BRICS countries, they not only focus on economic issues, reforming the global financial architecture and global geopolitical strategic issues, but they also discuss the core security issues affecting them. So BRICS has a meeting of the national security advisors. This is in run-up to the upcoming BRICS summit. Next month, the all-important BRICS summit is going to be held in Russia, in the Russian city of Kazan, where India has recently got permission to open a new consulate. When PM Modi visited Russia and met Putin a couple of months ago, India-Russia have agreed that India will be opening few new diplomatic missions, including in the city of Kazan, where you have a big Indian community. So in this city of Russia, the BRICS summit is going to take place. PM Modi will be participating, and he'll again get an opportunity to meet Putin with the leaders of China, Brazil, and the other members. So in the run-up to this event, Ajit Doval has attended the NSA meeting, and it acquires a lot of significance. Because Ajit Doval had a personal interaction with Russian leader Putin. He also met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang, who was also present at the event. So Wang is a top Chinese diplomat, a senior Politburo member of the Communist Party. So this back-to-back meetings that Ajit Doval held with Putin and Chinese diplomat Wang is of great significance, as it represents a dual diplomatic mission on India's part. There has been a lot of reporting regarding India's possible role in mediating between Russia and Ukraine to bring the war to an end. Couple of months ago, PM Modi visited Russia, met with Putin, urged Putin to end the war through peaceful talks, pointed out to Putin that this is not the time for war and you can't find solutions on the battlefield. He followed this up within few weeks by visiting Ukraine recently and not only gave support to Ukraine and assistance to Ukraine, but India has urged Ukraine as well to be willing to talk and negotiate, to include Russia in the peace process and ensure that this war is brought to an end. So now many experts believe that India is in a unique position because of its independent foreign policy, because of our multi-alignment, right? We have good ties with the Western powers as well, with US and European powers. So many experts believe, and even India media strongly believes, that PM Modi and India are in a unique position to influence both Putin and Zelensky and the global powers as well, to bring out a peaceful solution to end this brutal conflict. So this has projected India into limelight. Even in Europe, there has been a lot of discussion going on amongst think tanks and experts within European governments and in European media that potentially India could act as a mediator. They have been urging India to use its unique influence with Russia and Ukraine to work with each other and bring both of them to the negotiating table. So these reports have already spread out over the last couple of months, and now Ajit Doval's visit, carrying a message from Prime Minister Modi to Putin, brings the spotlight again on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So Ajit Doval has discussed the ongoing conflict, expressed concern about it, and proposed probably few ideas based on the approval from Prime Minister Modi. So this again brings to attention whether India can play this role of a mediator, right? This also highlights the growing profile of India in global geopolitics. If something like that were to happen, if India were to be able to bring Russia-Ukraine to the negotiating table and work out a mediated settlement, that would significantly enhance India's global image. But there are many who believe that this is unlikely. Though India will play a role on the margins, it's unlikely that India is going to play the lead role in bringing Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. Because if Russia wants to negotiate with Ukraine, Russia knows how to do it. It doesn't need the help of a mediator. If Russia wants to reach out to US, it knows how to reach out to the United States. Most experts believe both Russia and Ukraine are waiting currently for the US elections to get over. They are just trying to strengthen their ground positions by continuing the conflict. It's unlikely that anything will change on the battlefield for the next few months as US is headed towards presidential elections. So some experts believe that Russia-Ukraine, they will not agree for any talks or settlement right now because they will wait for the elections to be over, for the change in government, and then they will decide the future course of action. And if Russia wants to engage with Ukraine, it knows how to do it. It doesn't need the help of India or China, right? So those experts say that, of course, India, China will play a role on the margins, on the sidelines, but not the pivotal role. But there are others who point out that the recent engagement by Modi with Putin and Zelensky and the visit of Ajit Doval to Russia are clear indications that they are expecting India to be the mediator. Many European countries also have pointed out that India should use its influence to talk to both the sides. Recently, Dr. Jaishankar was in Europe as well, in Germany, and we discussed this article where he pointed out that yes, India is working on a 4-point principle which we are proposing to Russia and Ukraine. He said that the 4 principles promoted by Prime Minister Modi with regard to the Ukraine war is that 1, this is not the time for war. The war has to end. 2nd, you can't find solutions in the battlefield. And 3rd, Russia should be part of any talks, any negotiations, because Ukraine held its own peace conference, the Swiss peace conference with the Western powers. Russia was not even part of it. So how is it a peace process if the main aggressor is not part of the discussion? And the 4th principle that Jaishankar spoke about was India's continued engagement with both Russia and Ukraine to try and settle this war and bring this war to an end. So in this context, the visit of Ajit Doval and his personal interaction with Putin acquires a lot of significance. Also, it paves the way for the upcoming BRICS summit, where PM Modi will be traveling to Kazan, meeting again with Putin. Maybe that is an opportunity where India might propose the peace plan, right? So either something very big will come out of India, right? Or it could just be a regular visit and maybe the media is looking too much into it. The other important meeting that Ajit Doval had was with the top Chinese diplomat, Wang, right? So he is a senior Politburo member of the Communist Party, playing a critical role in China's foreign policy. So Ajit Doval and Wang have discussed the ongoing border crisis in Ladakh. India, China have been locked in a military standoff from the last 4 years, from 2020. Following the major escalation and the clashes that happened at Galwan River Valley, both India and China have been talking to each other. They've been trying to restore peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. So at some places where the clashes had occurred, like the Panong So Lake, at Galwan River Valley, at Hot Springs area, at all these places in Ladakh, India, China have already talked to each other, they have de-escalated, disengaged, and they have pulled out the troops as well. But there are other locations, a couple of locations where the standoff continues. For example, at Depsang Plains and at Demchok. At these two important locations in Ladakh, along the LAC, the military standoff continues. So India feels that China is in violation of the boundary agreements that we had signed in 1990s. Back in 1993, India, China had signed a peace and tranquility agreement along the line of actual control. In 1996, we had signed an agreement on confidence building measures to prevent unnecessary tensions along the disputed boundary. These are critical boundary agreements between India and China. In 2013, another agreement was signed on border cooperation between India and China. All these agreements were designed to prevent any miscommunication and any wrongful moves by either country. It restricted the powers of the armed forces as well. For example, both Indian Army PLA are prohibited from carrying heavy weaponry and opening fire against each other as per these agreements. They can't deploy heavy weaponry, they can't adopt any aggressive posture even when military training is being conducted, right? They need to focus on certain precautions so that it doesn't lead to any miscommunication and any unnecessary aggravation of tensions. Even if there is a issue which causes tension, even let's say there is a border incursion by one side, right? There is a process defined under these boundary agreements, especially under the Peace and Tranquility Agreement of 1993, that provides for talks at the level of military commanders, so that at the local level itself the issues can be discussed and resolved through a disengagement and de-escalation. But even after 4 years, at two places, we have not been able to resolve the issue, and India has clearly pointed out that China is to be blamed as it has not followed the principles of these boundary agreements. In fact, when China created this crisis in Ladakh in 2020, since then India has pointed out that China is in violation of these boundary agreements. But of late, we are seeing some progress. There has been some progress in the India-China relationship. The boundary talks between the military commanders has accelerated. There have been some positive messages from both India and China recently. So this gives hope that maybe at the upcoming BRICS summit, PM Modi will meet Chinese Premier Xi Jinping. Maybe there could be a solution worked out which will resolve the Ladakh tensions, at least for now. Is that clear? So that is why this meeting between Ajit Doval and the Chinese diplomat is very, very important. Is that clear? So let's pay attention to this topic. Let's keep tracking these developments. This is a developing story with Russia and as well as with China. Both are developing stories and we will continue to track them. Now let's move on to the prelim section and take a quick look at the two small articles. On page 14, we have an article referring to a statement by PM Modi where the Prime Minister has said that air taxis will be a reality in India soon. Just like you flag a Ola or a Uber to get from one place to another, in the near future it might be possible to book small aircrafts and helicopters to fly from one place to another. So India is very ambitious in this sector of civil aviation, right, to promote air taxis and to improve connectivity, regional connectivity in the country. So this statement was made by the Prime Minister at the second conference of civil aviation ministers of Asia Pacific region. India is hosting the meeting of Asia Pacific civil aviation ministers from across the Asia Pacific region, and this is being hosted by India in association with an international organization called the International Civil Aviation Organization. See, India is a key member of ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. So together with ICAO, which is a very important international organization, India has hosted the conference of civil aviation ministers from Asia Pacific. So for your prelims, this organization can be very, very important because the International Civil Aviation Organization is a UN specialized agency. It is part of the UN system. It is one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations and an intergovernmental body. Is that clear? It was formed in 1947 to promote civil aviation cooperation around the world, to set the safety standards for civil aviation, to recommend the policies for efficient international air travel, to deal with aviation safety, security, and promote cooperation between countries to discuss issues related to civil aviation. That is the primary role of International Civil Aviation Organization. It was set up in 1947 as a specialized agency of the UN through the Chicago Convention. And it is headquartered in Montreal, Canada, and India is a key member of this UN specialized agency. These are some basic facts you should note down so that you can answer any prelims question based on this. Coming to the last topic. On the second page of the supplement section of the Hindu, we have an article related to a deadly infectious disease called cholera. I'm sure all of you would have heard of cholera. So let's understand what exactly is cholera, what is its impact, how is it caused, just the basic facts for your prelims. This article focuses not just on the symptoms and the impact and its transmission. It also focuses on tackling cholera, its socio-economic impact, etc. But let's look at the important facts needed for our exam. Cholera is essentially an acute diarrheal infection. It is primarily carried through food and water. When you ingest or when you consume food or water which is contaminated with the pathogen that causes cholera, that is how you get infected with this disease. So what is the pathogen causing cholera? It is a bacteria known as Vibrio cholerae. Please make a note of this. Now, cholera is seen as a global public health threat, a major public health concern around the world, and it is an indicator of development as well. Because cholera is a result of poor development, poor sanitation, poor hygiene, lack of access to toilets, lack of access to drinking water, lack of access to clean food, right? Over urbanization. These are the parameters which play a role in determining the spread of cholera infection. Usually, cholera outbreaks are reported in slums, in developing, underdeveloped countries. It's usually the poor people who are more affected, right? That clearly shows the inequity associated with the disease. It's seen as an indicator of socio-economic inequality in the society and the lack of development in a country. So, it is seen as a disease of poverty. Usually, it is seen as a disease of poverty, something that affects the poor people, the vulnerable sections, the developing and poor countries. So, it's a very acute infection leading to severe diarrhea, and if it is not treated, within hours the patient could die. Due to severe loss of fluids and electrolytes, if the right treatment is not given, if the right intervention is not carried out, people can die because of cholera. The death rate is quite significant. According to WHO, several lakh people lose their lives every year due to cholera. Most of the deaths are occurring in developing, underdeveloped countries amongst the poor population. Is that clear? So, it results in extremely watery diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, headache, and sometimes fevers as well, and cramps, exhaustion. So, if you don't get immediate rehydration and antibiotics, the person could die because of dehydration. Is that clear? So, getting immediate rehydration through IV fluids and by increased consumption of fluids orally, along with intake of antibiotics to fight the bacterial infection, this treatment is essential, absolutely essential. It's a life-saving treatment. So, please note that the disease has a significant mortality rate and it's seen as a disease of poverty mainly because the spread of cholera occurs due to lack of clean water, lack of sanitation, lack of hygiene, poor planning in urbanization, overcrowding, excessive population, right? These problems that affect developing, underdeveloped countries, that is what results in the spread of diseases like cholera. And human to human transmission is possible. Now, let's say a person is infected with cholera and you consume the food prepared by that person, right? Maybe fecal bacteria is sitting on the hands of this person. So, if they touch some food or water and if you consume the same, you could also be infected. So, human to human transmission is very much possible in the case of cholera. Is that clear? Now, treatment is available, it's pretty simple as well. But the concern here is that in conflict zones and also as a result of climate change, there has been an increased reporting of these outbreaks. In many conflict zones where wars and civil wars are occurring, more such outbreaks are getting reported because of lack of clean water, lack of sanitation, lack of hygiene. So it's very important to treat this as a priority disease. Global warming will only increase the problem, it will only aggravate the situation, because global warming could lead to unavailability of water, water scarcity due to droughts, due to inadequate rainfall. Extreme weather events could contribute to the spread of the pathogen as well. So that is why it is important to get the population vaccinated through the oral cholera vaccines that are available. Especially the target population can be vaccinated. The most vulnerable population, those living in slums, right, and the poor community, they can be vaccinated through the oral vaccines that are available. So these are the measures that are necessary. So this completes my detailed analysis of today's The Hindu. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you have understood everything. And if you benefited from the session, do let me know in the comments. And don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. That is it. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.